Good morning. I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Jim Kile. Colonel Kile is the Canadian Army surgeon. He's responsible for the health and well-being of our 30,000 troops. Among his many activities, he has participated in peacekeeping missions in the former Republic of Yugoslavia. He's participated in humanitarian mission in Africa, and he's also ran the field hospital in Afghanistan. J'aimerais vous présenter le colonel Jim Kile, qui est le chirurgien canadien pour nos troupes canadiennes. Il est responsable de la santé et du bien-être de nos 30 000 soldats canadiens. Parmi ses activités, il a participé à des missions de maintien de la paix dans l'ancienne Yougoslavie. Il a participé à des missions humanitaires en Afrique et également il a dirigé l'hôpital de campagne en Afghanistan. So, Colonel Kile, can you tell us a little bit about the field hospital and how it came about?
I sure can. What you see behind you right here is simply a sample of the capability. It's not the full-blown field hospital. I'm a bit of a history buff, so I know this. The field hospital first deployed way back during the rebellion in Manitoba. In Manitoba for the first time, so well over 100 years ago. And at that time, the commanding officer of the unit was a major, and we used to call these guys surgeon majors. And so the current commanding officer is now a lieutenant colonel, so he'd be kind of like a surgeon lieutenant colonel. The hospital in its present day, as we move forward in time, naturally is state-of-the-art. It's lightweight, it's robust, and in its current size can deploy in its maximum capacity in about 60 days. But the key thing is, once they're deployed, once we get the hospital to where it needs to be, it can be set up in a matter of hours and can start receiving patients.
Excellent. So we're just going to walk through, and could you describe all of the various stations that are in the hospital and basically what they're used for?
I certainly can. In fact, as we walk through here, I'll probably be having some flashbacks to when I was the commanding officer in Afghanistan. What I would like to do, though, if it's okay, is just have some of the individuals that are experts in their area just maybe talk about what they're going to do. So why don't we just go ahead?
Excellent. Donc, le colonel Kile va nous faire une visite guidée de l'hôpital de campagne des forces canadiennes, donc en nous décrivant chaque poste et les responsabilités de chaque personne qui participe ou qui sont déployées à l'hôpital de campagne.
Okay, so why don't we just head over here. Now, the one thing I just want to emphasize again is this is a whole bunch of stuff crammed into a smaller area, and of course the footprint would be quite a bit larger. And what you see here is just some of the capability that we have as examples. So why don't we head over here to our, if you will, our operating room. And what I have here is I have some operational technicians who can speak to what you're seeing right behind me here. So I'll just move out of the way, and if you wouldn't mind.
OK. Donc, on est ici dans la salle ou le théâtre d'opération de l'hôpital de campagne. Donc, on va poser quelques questions au personnel responsable. Can you describe a little bit what happens here?
Okay, so essentially what we have here is our field operating room. This is very similar to what you see in civilian operating rooms. We've brought a small sampling of the equipment we hold at field hospital. We didn't feel it necessary to bring everything here today. So everything, like I said, is very similar to what you see in civilian hospitals. So we cut on ground, open up our willards, bring out our equipment, set it all up, and then we get ready to operate.
So how long does it take you to set up all of this equipment?
Not very long, and it depends on the mission, and the mandate determines what equipment we bring. So the more we bring, the longer it takes to set up. The less we bring, the less time it takes. Bare minimum, 2 hours, we're good to go, and that's bare minimum.
2 hours?
Mm-hmm, absolutely, but that would not include, for example, our anesthesia machine. We wouldn't, on the bare minimum, we don't bring the anesthesia machine. We rely on TIVA, total IV anesthesia, and so that reduces our setup time quite a bit.
So then let's say in your, I don't know if you have such a thing as a typical mission, what equipment would you bring?
Bare minimum is the operating room table, which the one we have here is not the bare minimum one. We have one that's smaller and lighter, which we'd bring. Absolute bare necessities, TIVA, suction, syringe pumps, cautery, instrumentation, consumables, medications. Am I missing anything?
That would be it, yeah.
So how many staff or personnel would be working, let's say, in your typical operation in this section?
Okay, so each TUNE for an operating room, and again, mission specific determines how many operating rooms we bring, but per operating room, I believe it's anesthetist, general surgeon, ortho surgeon, two perioperative nurses and 2 OR techs. So, and then sometimes that changes depending on the mission or the mandate or what hire says we're bringing, but quite a crew.
One of the things that's kind of evident here is the whole field hospital is based on a modular system. So depending, as what was said, on the type of mission, a part of the hospital or all of the hospital can be broken off to go with whatever unit is going into a theater of operation. So there's a baseline capability, and then you can add on to it as you go.
Sounds great. So on to the next.
Okay, why don't we head over to, well, one of the things that hospitals do is, oh, by the way, I must say about the operating room, the standard is equal to the Canadian standard in terms of sterile environment, positive pressure, and all those things. We can do that kind of stuff in theater of operations. So other thing we can do, of course, is we can do diagnostics. And part of diagnostics, we have X-ray capability, and of course we have laboratory capability. And I'd just like you to come over and meet our laboratory technician.
So we're here in the diagnostic area of the...
This is a sample of a laboratory setup here, and I'm going to ask Sergeant Scott to maybe speak to it a little bit, since he is the laboratory technician and certainly, compared to me, the expert.
OK, donc on est passé à la section de l'hôpital qui traite du diagnostic. Et puis on est ici avec le technicien en charge qui va nous donner une courte description de comment cette section de l'hôpital fonctionne.
Perfect, thank you. So this is essentially a snapshot of what the field hospital lab would look like. We have every capability a civilian hospital would have, just in a smaller scale. Okay, so in a civilian hospital, you may have an analyzer the size of this whole desk, whereas here we have it be the size of this. So we can do your hematology, you can do coagulation, your full chemistry. We have a full working blood bank. We have limited microbiology. It's all deployment dependent, and what they require, we can order specific to that deployment. So it's a very versatile lab, very capable lab.
So how many people would be working in a lab like this in your typical operation, let's say?
So typically we would have, depending on the shifts, if we're running 24 hours a day, it could be anywhere from 2 to 5. Yes, ma'am.
And so how do the logistics work then, in a nutshell?
Well, we would get our orders, and we would know where we're going, so we would decide on what we're bringing, what the capabilities need to be. We would send out messages for everyone who's going to get deployed, so they would be aware of it. We would order our stuff, or our reagents, and all of our equipment, and that would be resupplied on an ongoing basis. So I would bring my initial stuff, so maybe a week worth of supplies, and then that would be resupplied ongoing throughout the mission. So depending if it's a 30-day mission or a 6-month mission, we would have different rotations of people and resupplies throughout.
So then supplies are flown in continuously during the entire mission?
Yes, ma'am, and that would be the same for the entire hospital.
Wow, very interesting. Really, really interesting. Great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was just chatting with some of our other folks here in the field hospital.
No problem. So what's our next station?
To my right here, to our X-ray technician who's deployed now with our little field hospital.
Hello.
Go ahead.
I'm Petty Officer Lindhorst. I'm a medical radiation technologist, and we just have new digital capability into the forces. So they're rugged machines that you wouldn't see in a normal hospital setting, but fully digital, fully capable of doing everything that you would do at a bedside. We also have ultrasound capability within the field. We have ultrasound technologists inside the military, and we also have CT scanner that would be deployed on large-scale operations. So it recently just came back from Afghanistan, and it hasn't been deployed since.
Okay, so then in a typical mission, if there is such a thing, how many people would be working in this part of the hospital?
Depending on what our capability are, if we have X-ray, ultrasound, and CT scan, it would be 6 technologists, and we could with no CT scan, we'd be at about 4 technologists.
So typically, then, do you bring all of this equipment, or it depends on the mission?
It definitely depends on the mission, the size, and the number of personnel we're expected to treat.
Back here. Why don't we just move on to the next area, which is right behind me here. Yeah.
Okay.
Please understand that in a real field hospital, things aren't quite as close, but for the sake of the demonstration, they are. I'll just turn it over. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, ma'am. My name is Master Corporal Lozon. I'm stationed at CFB Petawawa with one Canadian Field Hospital. And this is an example of a typical trauma bay that you would see in any one of the configurations of the hospitals that we would deploy.
So can you describe a little bit what activities would undergo in this kind of a situation?
Right. So this is for resuscitation purposes, right? So regardless on whether we're on a humanitarian mission or whether we're on a combat mission, the role of the Resuscitation Bay is exactly that, to do resuscitation and stabilization and some triage if necessary, depending on the size of our facility. So we would have a patient that would come to us, more than likely treated by paramedics, which we call med techs, on scene at point of injury. And they would come to us either through a helicopter or from on ground through one of our ambulance systems. And they would come to us like this, and we would continue on with the general resuscitation that you would do anywhere. So we would generally work in a team with a physician, hopefully 3 med techs and a nurse, and we would just ensure airway, breathing, circulation, stabilization, and preparation for the definitive care, which would be surgical intervention.
So then from here, they would be sent to one of the other stations in the hospital?
Yeah, with any luck, we would have him have the patient stabilized enough in order to go straight over to OR. Unfortunately, in some cases, if we have too many patients or we already have a case ongoing in the OR, we may have to sit here in the bay and wait until there's opportunity for us to get the patient in next for.
And how many of these stations would there be, let's say, in your in an average combat situation?
Right. Good question. So, and again, it depends on our mission. So whether we have, and I don't want to throw out a bunch of acronyms, but whether we're in a larger facility, our Role 3, we would have a larger amount of bays that we would have, resuscitation bays, or if we're in a smaller facility like this, the Role 2, we would have in this 2 to 4, or depending on what was dictated by the chain of command at that time was what's needed.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to add one thing in terms of the trauma. Well, probably a couple things. One is that what you see here is exactly what somebody would get in a Canadian hospital in terms of the training, the training that the personnel get, and the equipment. It's exactly the same as what you'd see in a tertiary care hospital, trauma center, Canadian hospital. We take that and we bring it to the field. Just to get back to the question about how many trauma bays there might be, certainly when the field hospital deploys in its lightest fashion, so the smallest version, there's always going to be one. And then we can add 2 or 3, or we can go up to 5. The rate limiter isn't so much the equipment availability, it's the trained people that we need to man them capability. And that's oftentimes where we would look to our allies to work with us, like we did in Afghanistan and Kandahar, to provide trauma teams or members to the trauma team to help us man a trauma bay, as an example. So that's an important thing to realize. So since we've had our little tour here, you're kind of getting an idea of what it takes to put one of these out the door. So when it goes out in its basic, and we talked about that when we talked to the OR techs over there, we'll have 2 types of surgeons, an orthopedic surgeon, a general surgeon, our anesthesiologist goes. We have usually about 16 or so nurses that will go as well, and then we'll have trauma-trained physicians to run the base. Usually there's about 3 of those. And then all the support staff that goes into making sure these folks can do their job. In addition, of course, as you can appreciate, we have medical technicians that are specifically trained to work in a certain area of the tertiary or the field hospital. So you saw some folks over there in the OR, you saw an individual here in the trauma bay, and of course we have specialized medical technicians that, for example, run our labs and our diagnostics, such as the lab and the X-ray.
OK, juste pour résumer rapidement, ce que le colonel Kile, et s'il vous plaît, corrigez-moi si j'oublie quelque chose, ce qu'il a souligné, c'est que le personnel et puis l'équipement qui est ici, et surtout ici dans la section traumatique, pour les soins traumatiques, c'est exactement ce que l'on retrouverait dans un hôpital au Canada avec les mêmes normes et les mêmes standards de soins, la même formation pour les médecins et les techniciens et le même équipement et plus ou moins les mêmes procédures en fait d'anesthésie, de sanitation, c'est ça? Oui. Et tout ce qui vient avec, disons, qui se produit dans un hôpital au Canada. So we've touched a little bit on this at the various stations, but can you tell us how long it takes to actually deploy and set up a field hospital such as this in a real situation?
Okay. Maybe the best way to do it is just to pick a specific type of mission. When we first went into Afghanistan, so when we were not in Kandahar, but we were in Kabul, the version of the field hospital that went was the basic version, the one actually we just described a while ago, where we had one OR, two trauma bays, we had some inpatient capability, I think there was 6 beds, we had a small ICU, we had our lab, our x-ray, and so on. That takes about, we have 60 days to get ready, but we can do it quicker if need be, because everything is prepared and ready to go. But it's usually 60 days maximum. Then again, as one of the medical technicians said, once we're on the ground, we can be taking patients in that kind of facility within 2 to 3 hours.
It's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible, because there's an awful lot of equipment in there.
There is a lot of equipment in there. I must say I'm very impressed by the work that the field hospital has done to bring this to the Family Medicine Forum.
Can you describe for us, you've talked a little bit about the military and the combat missions that the hospital goes into, but it also goes into other crisis situations. So could you describe a little bit what kind of missions that it has done in the past and that you foresee in the future?
You know, you're absolutely right. It does participate in other types of missions. Probably a good example of a different kind of mission was Haiti after the earthquake hit. Most Canadians probably know that we have what's called a disaster assistance response team, and this is a medical capability that can go out the door within a week. Once there's an event, it can deploy very, very quickly to help out in a crisis situation. But it can't take with it within a week, for example, robust surgical capability. So in Haiti, when the disaster assistance response team got into Haiti, it was realized that there was a surgical capability that was needed because the hospital infrastructure in Haiti had been damaged more than was appreciated. So these guys, field hospital, very quickly packed up everything on pallets, got on aircraft, and flew the entire this version of the field hospital down to set up surgical capability to work in conjunction with the DART.
Interesting. And in Canada, have you ever had opportunity to use the field hospital to deploy it in Canada in any crisis situation?
Indeed, the field hospital did deploy during the ice storm, the very famous ice storm, and if I'm not mistaken, that was probably around 1998, 98, 99. And it did deploy, again, because it could get to an area where it was difficult for patients or for people to get to their hospital, their clinic. So it did go out the door, and actually went out the door fairly fast. Now, the version that went out back then would be quite different from the one now in terms of the technology, the robustness of the equipment, because, of course, that was 1998.
Donc, juste pour résumer, Colonel Kile nous a mentionné, a décrit quelques missions que l'hôpital de campagne où elle a été déployée, dont la mission en Haïti lorsqu'il y a eu le tremblement de terre. Donc, ce qu'il nous a dit, c'est que c'est une version petite qui ressemble un peu à celle-ci qui a été déployée en Haïti. L'hôpital a également été déployé au Canada, par exemple, pendant la tempête du verglas en 98. Il y a eu une version de l'hôpital qui a été utilisée également au Canada. You mentioned that you and your personnel treated this as to bring and set up this hospital here as a training mission. So actually this was very real for you, as if you were actually going into a field mission. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, that was indeed the case. What the commanding officer of the field hospital unit did in Petawawa was he said, okay, I'm going to go to Toronto. I'm going to set up the Family Medicine Forum. Let's pretend that we're going to Toronto to deal with some kind of domestic crisis. Now, I doubt Toronto will get flooded, but let's just say there's big floods. And so what he did is he trained his crew here to deploy as if they were going into a flood. And all they did was instead of going to where there might be a flood, they set up right here. But the whole planning, preparation, and road movement from Petawawa to Toronto was as if they were doing a domestic operation.
Excellent. Very interesting. Is there anything else you would like to add that you think that your colleagues at FMF would find interesting?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for an opportunity to present what I consider one of the most amazing capabilities that the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Medical Services has. So I really do appreciate that. And it was really an honor just to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Colonel Kile. Ce fut vraiment intéressant de nous faire une petite visite guidée de l'hôpital de campagne des Forces canadiennes. C'est vraiment intéressant. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.